Hi everyone and welcome to this course on Next.js. In today's time, if you look at any programming language, whether it's Python or JavaScript, it is highly likely that you would use a framework with it. If we talk about Python, you have lots of frameworks, like pandas, NumPy, and so on. And if we talk about JavaScript, we also have a lot of frameworks like React, Next.js, and so on. Okay, so basically there is no comparison of all the frameworks that have been created in JavaScript because JavaScript owns a lot of the frameworks, such as React, Angular, Vue, and so on. So these types of frameworks are available in the market today. And usually after every framework, there is an iteration, there is an updated version of it, there is always like a smarter, better, quicker version of it. And in the same way that this happens, the updated version of React.js is Next.js. So you can see it like this basically. You can just see Next.js as the next better version of like React.js. And yeah, from a macro perspective, there is not much difference between React and Next. But if you dive deeper into the details, you can see Next.js as the improved version of React.js. Okay, so in this course, we'll learn about Next.js. We'll also learn about how to build a single page website using Next.js. We'll learn how to do server-side and static-side rendering and how to do API integration in Next.js. Alright, so without further ado, let's begin. Before starting the course on Next.js, let's first see what we will learn in this course. So we'll cover everything from the beginning, like how does Next.js work, how can components be created in it, how it can be made SEO friendly, how is routing done in Next.js. We'll see all these things in this course. If you have prior experience with React.js, you will find Next.js relatively easy to grasp because the concepts of React.js and Next.js are very similar. There are just a few minor differences. Okay, so you'll see all these things. I'll add some basic knowledge of JavaScript. If you are unfamiliar with JavaScript, you will be able to understand it. Okay, so because if you want to work with JavaScript, one crucial aspect is logic building. Next.js is a software that you need to learn how it works, and then you have to apply JavaScript code and build your logic for specific tasks. You can achieve this using a framework such as Vue.js or AngularJS. And it doesn't mean that you can't use, Vue.js if you don't know JavaScript. But to use Vue.js effectively, you have to know about JavaScript. Even if you don't know JavaScript, you can still learn how components are made and how everything works in Vue.js. And then after that, when you apply JavaScript, you can enhance your work. Okay, so that's it basically. That's why the best recommendation is to have some basic knowledge before starting any work. You need to know the basics of JavaScript at least. And yeah, so that's why before starting anything, I'll give you some background information so that you'll feel more comfortable while working with Next.js. So that's it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Next.js is our React framework that provides you with building blocks to create web applications. It is built on top of React and adds a number of features that make it easier to build and deploy high-performance web applications. Some of the key features of Next.js include server-side rendering, SSR. This means that the HTML for your pages is rendered on the server before it's sent to the client. This can improve the performance of your application as the client does not have to render the HTML himself. Another feature is static site generation, SSG, which is a variation of SSR. In static site generation, the HTML for your pages is generated at build time. This can be useful for pages that do not change very often, as it can improve the performance of your application. The third one is automatic code splitting. This means that your application code is deployed into smaller chunks that only are loaded when they are needed. This can improve the performance of your application by reducing the amount of code that needs to be loaded on each page load. Built-in routing. Next.js comes with a built-in routing system that makes it easy to create and manage your application's routes. The last key feature of Next.js is image optimization. Next.js includes a number of features for optimizing your application's images, such as lazy loading and image compression. This is one of the main reasons why high-performance companies recommend Next.js for building web applications, as its performance is very high. Okay, so as you have your application by rendering the HTML of your pages on the server, you can experience very high quality developer experience. With the huge community of Next.js developers, this becomes the main key feature and benefit of Next.js. Okay, so that's it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Okay, so we can also see that there are some downsides to React.js. So what is the reason why we should use Next.js instead of React.js? First of all, React.js itself says that we should use the updated version of React.js. I'll show you this statement on the website, which has been made by the developers of React.js, and they advise to use the updated version of React.js. Why? The reason is that Google and other social media platforms consider Next.js to be more eco-friendly compared to React.js. This is because Next.js incorporate SEO optimization, which allows social media chat boards to read their pages. I'll show you an example. If you see the preview of this image without going to Instagram or any other social media, you can review that page to see what kind of posts there are. So you can see the posts that are figuring out here. However, many times when you share a link, only the link is shared and nothing else appears. So this is the biggest reason why it's recommended to use Next.js more. The page view changed because React.js depends on JavaScript and HTML CSS is loaded on JavaScript browser. After working on JavaScript, React.js gives us a page view on the client side, but Next.js does a different job. Okay, so in comparison to Next.js, when we display a blog post or images on a website using React.js, they are already rendered through JavaScript. However, in Next.js, the images we see either come through a CDN link or directly from the server side, not via JavaScript. Now, I'll open my browser and go to the React.js website. So it's explained there why powered frameworks of React.js should be used. Go to the React.js website and go to the installation section, then start a new project. Okay, so if you want to build a new app or a new website fully with React.js, we recommend picking one of the React powered frameworks popular in the community. These frameworks provide features that most apps and sites eventually need, including routing, data fetching, and generating HTML. The first production-grade React-powered framework is Next.js. Okay, so the first production-grade React-powered framework is Next.js. Then there is Remix, Gatsby, and Expo. These are for the React native apps. Okay, if you want to use React.js, you should use Next.js instead of React. There are specific reasons for this, such as routing, data fetching, and generating HTML. So this was our lecture on why we should not use React.js, because React itself suggests to use Next.js. And by doing so, you can always stay updated with the latest technology. Alright, so that's it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Okay, so we have completed our theoretical part, and now firstly we'll see like the installation process before setting up Next.js. So first of all, we are going to install a code editor. There are many code editors available, but the most commonly used one for advanced programming is Visual Studio Code. Most programming work is performed in this Visual Studio Code due to its efficiency and the availability of various extensions. So, we have to visit the website of Visual Studio Code and install the operating system that you are using, such as Mac OS, Windows, or Linux. So we have like to install the corresponding version, for the operating system. In my case, I'm using Windows, so it automatically selects the Windows version by default for me. Of course, like if you use Mac OS or Linux, the website will automatically detect your operating system and provide you with the appropriate recommendation accordingly. Okay, now I'll click on the download button and start the download process. The download has started. Here, Visual Studio Code is downloaded. Now, I'll start the installation process. Firstly, I'll click on I accept the agreement, then click Next and select all the checkboxes. After that, I'll click Next and start the installation. Once the installation is completed, I'll click on Finish. Now my Visual Studio Code is installed. After the installation, I open my Visual Studio Code, which I had already installed. So if you are installing this for the first time, you will see a slightly different interface, but most of the other things will remain the same. So here I click on Settings and will change the theme. My theme is currently dark, so I'll switch to light modern. This way I've selected my theme preference. And yeah, so that's it basically for this lecture. In the next lecture we'll install important extensions that will help us with coding. Okay, so that's it, and now on to the next one. Alright, so to use any JavaScript or TypeScript framework, we have to have two things: Node.js and NPM. When you install Node.js, NPM is also installed automatically. NPM stands for Node Package Manager, and it serves as a package manager that efficiently manages all our packages. NPM is crucial because it manages all the libraries. Without Node.js, you won't be able to install any of the frameworks because Node.js provides a friendly environment. Node.js is a cross-platform JavaScript runtime environment. Okay, so it's also a kind of library that facilitates the execution of any web application from the client's browser to the outside. Node.js provides us with an environment where we can run any project or application outside of the client's browser. Whenever we run our project on localhost, it does not run on the browser. Instead, it runs on localhost, where our files are stored and our application is running. You have to install the LTS version of Node.js, not the current version. The current version is running properly and there are no bugs, but it's like some kind of working process version, while LTS is like for long-term support. That means like it runs with us for a long time. If you want to check if your system already has Node.js installed or not, you can press Windows plus R. A box like this will appear where you have to enter CMD and press OK. After pressing OK, you will get a prompt like this. In this prompt, you have to check if your Node.js is already installed or not by writing Node.js -version. Here you can see my Node.js version is 18.14 and my current version is 18.16. So you have to note that your Node.js should be 18, not 19. If your LTS version is 19 and you have 18, then you have to update it because in the next version you might get bugs. Okay. Secondly, we have to check which NPM version is present. So NPM is already installed with version 9.5. My NPM is already installed, but if you don't have it, you have to install it. Alright, so in the next lecture, we'll see the proper environment setup and we'll start working on it after proper installation. Okay, so that's it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Okay, so now we'll start the process of installing Next.js. First of all, you have to go to Next.js website. You can develop and maintain your Next.js projects through the website. It's supported by a company based in a specific country, so you can see the website of the company here. Once you are on the website, you can go to the documents section. We've given some commands and details in the documents. You can see the request in Next.js. Everything has been explained on how to use the documents. Now let's move on to the installation process. So the system requirements state that Node.js version 16.8 or later is necessary. As we saw in the installation, the current version is 18, which meets the requirements. We have various operating systems available, such as Windows, Linux, Mac operating system, and so on. Whichever operating system supports our Next.js application. So you're gonna use it. Here you can see the command that needs to be executed in the terminal. Here you can see npx. If you react as per your request, the command you get is npm. So what's the difference between npx and npm? npm and npx are the same. However, npx is a type of package runner, whereas npm is a package manager. It's used to install, update, or uninstall packages in Node.js. It also manages the dependencies. And when we use npx, it runs the package before installing it. So it does not require any installation. However, in npm, we have to install the package before running it. We have to make it available for our project, for it to run properly. Okay, so this summarizes the basic information about npx and npm. To proceed, you have to copy the command. After copying, you can open it in the terminal, in your VS Code, and install it properly. I will run it in the same code. By adding cmd here, it will select my folder. Then I have to paste my command here. After pasting it, it's not necessary to add the latest name. So I'll just add my folder here by adding the name of my app. Upon hitting enter, the installation will take place within my app folder. I will add some configurations to the folder, for example, whether to install TypeScript in our project or not. If you have knowledge about TypeScript, you can add it to the script. In my case, I'll proceed without TypeScript. Okay, so additionally, we are asked if we want to install ESLint. So ESLint is used to detect errors in our code. If there are any mistakes in the code, such as commas or any other errors, then ESLint will identify them. I will select yes for ESLint. I don't want to use the Tailwind CSS. Instead, we'll use just CSS. So I want to use the source directory. Okay, the source directory is confirmed. Now let's use the app router. Yes, I will use the app router. So now, what is import alias? Import alias is used when we import a component or anything, and we need to specify the path for it. So we can set it through import alias. So here, the specific method is this. I'll select this one and press enter. Now my entire React app is installed. All the modules and dependencies have been added to this. So now we have to run the command by the name of npm run dev. If there is any missing directory, I'll clear it. Okay, so actually the reason why this application didn't run initially is because we hadn't selected the folder. We hadn't selected our folder. This installation process is specifically for Next.js, and our installation takes place in my app. So here we have to do, Next.js cd my app, and then we go to command npm run dev. Now a link will appear on localhost. Copy this link and paste it into the browser. So the file list did not open because it's currently in proper working mode. However, here we can see that the website is completely opened. Now we'll open this folder in our VS Code. Then our my app is opened in our VS Code. So here we see all the code like stc, layout.js, and page.js. In page.js, things were already created. The results that appear in this browser are due to this content. So all this content is displayed there. Here we can see that you can instantly deploy your Next.js site to a shareable URL with Vercel. So one content is present on our browser. Here, if I want to change or update that content, then I'll do this. I'll go to the VS Code and remove all contents. Then I add a word of, like hello world and save it. Then I refresh the browser, and so here the hello world has changed. This is the first change in our whole application. This whole application can also be removed and replaced with a different one. So the next lecture, we'll see how to check our web application. But for now, that's pretty much it. So thank you very much for watching, and see you soon in the next one. In the last lecture, we installed Next.js and ran it on the browser, making a small change. Now in this lecture, we'll look at the folder structure of Next.js and learn about the functions of files present within it. We have a type shared folder in this lecture. So first of all, there is a folder called .next, which contains subfolders like server, static, and type. Inside the type folder, there is a TypeScript file that can be accessed via TypeScript. Okay, so this folder contains the layout TypeScript, which can be used if you want to work on layout scripts. However, this folder is not very important. There is also a server uploader, which is used because our website is far from the server. In the second one, so we have node_modules. In any framework, node_modules are the most important part, since the npm and all the packages are installed in these node modules. Okay, if I delete or remove this node, my website and application will become useless. So I'll not be able to use any results because all the work is done in node_modules. So we are like working on node and we have installed npm on this node. All these processes take place through node_modules. After that, there is a public folder containing the next.svg and vrsel.svg pictures. This folder is not that special, therefore we can also remove it. Next, there is the source and app folders. So we'll create components and develop our application in this section. The source folder is where everything is built. First of all, there is the favicon.ico icon, which is used as the Vercel icon. There is an error that occurs here. This is because I used the image of the favicon. However, I have to redo it. Okay, after that, we'll work on globals.css. So global.css means that in this application, all the CSS used on the website is defined through global.css. For instance, if we go to the page.js file, the CSS class is used with the name styles.main. In that class, I'll find the .main. Okay, actually, sorry, there is no need for global.css. So global.css is the CSS that works in all things. So here, the maximum width of the body is 100 VW. This will work everywhere. However, the page module.css is used for a specific purpose. If I want to add a background color, I'll add gray here and save it. My web application's color will become gray. So I've used the module of my CSS in the application page. Okay, in the description, I can also use all the things that are used here. The variables used here are already defined in global.css. So here we can see the maximum width or border width settings. Now the page.js file is in our full application. We can also remove it if I delete all the data and ensure that the main tag is still there, as the CSS will be applied in the frame. So I refreshed it and now the screen is blank. So I'll use the h1 tag here and write hello world here. I'll save it and check the results in the browser. Now, here you can see that it comes automatically in the center and is slightly more aligned. This is achieved through the module of my.css. The source folder doesn't have many files, but if you install the React app, it will have a lot of files in the folder. So the main file is next.config.js and it has many configurations. If you want to do customizations at an advanced level, meaning if you want to customize the web app, make environmental variables, perform optimizations, specify plugins or add extensions, you can do all of this in next.config.js. Okay, so this file allows you to work at any advanced level with Next.js. After that, there is the package.json file. All the NPM and third-party packages installed will be present here in these dependencies. Okay, so here we can see that react.dom, react, next, eslint, config, next, and eslint are present, which we have installed. Whenever we installed any extra NPM packages, they will be added over here because that's the role of package.json. Additionally, there is a readme file. So if you have any issues during the installation, you can refer to this file. This is the basic lecture in which we learned about the folder structure. Okay, next we'll start working on next.js. So thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next lecture. In the last lecture, we completed the installation of Next.js, we changed the program, and we've seen like the view of our web page. Okay, so we viewed everything on our web page. We printed also a small statement of hello world, and our Next.js has started working properly. Now in this lecture, we'll learn about export default and export normal and how they work and their purpose. First of all, as you can see here, we've added an image. However, there is no use of that image, which is why this link looks very light. So, we'll remove this unused link and just leave this necessary link. The CSS that I have used here as a module, like if I remove it, my CSS will not be applied properly. So, I'll press Ctrl Z and save it. Okay, so this is our main link that's being used now. Okay, now let's discuss named and default exports. So here you can see that the export we have done is a default export. If I remove the default keyword here and just import the function and component of home, it means our export will be named export. Now, what's the difference between default and named exports? So default export is mainly used when we have to export from a single value module. For example, if I want to import any component in this component, what will be its process? So I'll write import here, whatever I have to import. So here I'll import images from the images folder. Now this link indicates that whatever we are importing, we are exporting it as default. So default export means that we are importing a specific single value from the module. In comparison, if I have to import images as named exports, then I'll use brackets like this and they will become my named and normal exports. So normal export means that we have to import multiple values from any module. Now, along with images, I'll add here DOM, reactor DOM, and drag DOM. Okay, and this way I can import a specific thing using default export. So in this way, if I need to import multiple values, we can import them through normal export. I previously explained the small difference between normal and default export and why each of them is used. So that's pretty much it for this lecture. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next one. In this lecture, we'll start by making child components from parent components and passing data through them. First, we'll create the components while staying in this component. So to do this, we'll add a shortcut key for a React arrow function component. This will generate the component automatically. Now, simply remove this line and choose the name you want for your component. Then remove the export from here. As I mentioned earlier, when we use normal export, we don't need to use default. When we use export default, we have to use the default keyword. So here we use normal instead of default. I'll remove the export keyword. You have to add your component here. I'll use the home component. You have to remember that whenever you want to export any component, the first letter of the component's name should be capitalized. I'm facing an error here. I'll export this and import home as the default. Here I'm facing an error because we have already used the home component name. So we'll use this as a page and do not need to export this. I'll remove this. Now I'll add the first page title and save it. If I go to the browser, I can only see the statement hello world. I do not see any other statements. So why not? Because we have to use this page and this component. We can use it from wherever we want to go. So okay, we have to use like this component and it's related to the page. I have saved the component. I'll refresh it and the first page is present here. If I cut this and use it above, it will be up here. This is the first page. Okay, I can use this component as much as I want to. I've used it a lot, so I'll refresh it. My page is printing successfully. If we want to pass data dynamically, we have many ways, but the best method in React and Next.js is to use props. When we want to pass data dynamically in one or two components, we do it through props. We'll pass the data to a child component using props. So firstly, I'll declare props here and we will read the props in detail. So I've just passed the data to the component and we'll use this here. I'll use props name here. So this is the page name. Now I'll put the name of the page and it will remain the same on the first page. I'll copy this first name and paste it here into all the components. I just have to change the title here. Okay, so here's the second, here's the third, here's the fourth, and the last one is the fifth. We have created 5 components. As you can see, when we refresh, the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth pages are printed here. This way, we are passing data dynamically from one component to other components. So, we can pass data through props in this way. In the next lecture, we'll make a sample component and learn how to build it. Here, I'm explaining the details of the component. So look at this website. It's not necessary that there's only one component in the Next.js website. Here, we can see some technical error appearing, which is why it's scrolling downward. Otherwise, there are different components on this website. So there are different sections on the showcase page, and we can divide these different sections into components. Most of the components used here are for the different pages like showcase, docs, blog, etc. When I jump from one page to the second page, I can't see any loading over here. So this is the benefit of making a single page application, and the user experience becomes better. Components are made so that we can distribute the data into different components. If we use all the data in one component, the file becomes larger and it becomes difficult to manage. That's why we make different components. Like this, we made components. And yeah, so this is a small component, but in the next lecture, we'll make, like client components and we'll see like how they work. But that's it for now. So thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next one. In this lecture, the components that I have imported were omitted because I'll be explaining how we can use events and functions in Next.js. You might think that events and functions are very basic concepts. However, it's important to understand them in the context of Next.js. Actually, we are working on Next.js and not on React.js. So if we were on React.js, you could use the simple client-side rendering in the same way. I want to tell you how the service rendering takes place, because when you use an event, it won't be able to apply to your component properly. Likely, I'll create a button here. I'll click on the button here and save it. I'll use an anonymous onClick event here and then create an anonymous arrow function. I'll use an alert here. Okay, so an error occurs here. Now I put here a title like hello world or server-side rendering and save it. Okay, now here there's an error. However, my alert function is properly working. I'll save it. I'll go to the console. So I'm making an error again. Why is this error happening? It's because the event handler cannot be passed to the client component props. If you need interactivity, consider converting part of this to a client-side component. We are working with Next.js here. So if you want to work on the client side, we need to specify that we want to perform client-side rendering. So to remove this error, we have to write use client here. Okay, you are using it for the client. Now I'll refresh here. My page is working properly. As soon as I click, the client-side rendering alert has been opened. As soon as I click here, the client-side rendering alert has been opened. If we have written the client-side here, whenever we make any component, it will be necessary to specify that we want to work on the client side. For example, if I go to the login page and add a button there and click on it, I'll have to use client side to indicate that we want to work on the client side. However, if you have made a lot of components, like subcomponents in one component, you don't need to specify it again and again. You can add it just once. This way, we can do rendering on the client side in Next.js. We just have to tell that this is our client component. Similarly, we can use the function here. Okay, so we can also use it here. I'll just declare the const variable and add an arrow function here. Actually, I'll add an arrow here. So I'll make an alert in it by the name of picker. I saved it. And here I'll also pass the parameter. The message is picker saved. Now you'll see why I called it picker here, because this is our parameter. Based on this parameter, our color will be picked. I can dynamically give any color here, which will be automatically added to the alert. So the alert is used, and instead of alert, I've called the function color. And I've put the color name, which I want to use. So here I'll put yellow and just save it. And after saving, I'll refresh. And as soon as I click here, my yellow color will be printed. So in this way, we can use anonymous functions and print arrow function through an alert. This concludes our basic lecture in which we have seen how we can run a client component in Next.js. Okay, so that's pretty much it for now. Let's move on to the next lecture. Hi and welcome to this new lecture on rendering. So before we dive deeper into more advanced topics, we need to discuss this small topic, which is rendering. So the next sessions will be focused on state management and how we can use hooks and how to manipulate data through states. But of course, before that, we should know what rendering is. So rendering is a single page application which plays a crucial role in updating any user interface. It gives a smooth and interactive user experience. There are many roles in rendering, including initial rendering, component rendering, dynamic updates, routing, and views. Optimization, and all these aspects, they are just part of rendering. Now, what is rendering? Basically, it's a kind of update for us. So let's take rendering as an example of an update. Whenever there is an event call or a function call, first the whole function will be updated. Then there will be rendering, and finally we get the result. For example, if I go to the website of Next.js, I'm currently on the main page. If I go to the showcase page, I get the result without any loading or scrolling. The result I got is through rendering. So rendering plays the biggest role in single page applications. Now, let's look at an example of that. Here I'll declare a variable a and set it equal to Joan. Now, whenever this variable is called, the whole component will not be rendered there. Only that area where this variable is called will be updated. When that page is refreshed, the variable will be declared there. But if I take an example here, let's call it my name state. So now if the state of my name works properly and I set it to Joan Lewis, whenever this state is called as compared to a variable, not only the variable will be changed, but the whole component will be re-rendered. The function will be found and its result will be given to us on our application. So, because of rendering, we get help in creating a single page web application. So this was our simple rendering introduction. So here I'll explain a little bit the initial rendering. So when a single page application is first loaded, the initial rendering occurs where the code HTML, CSS and JavaScript files are downloaded by the browser. So the single page application's main JavaScript file is executed and the application's components and routes are set up. Okay, so the initial rendering sets the foundation for the subsequent rendering processes. Alright, so that's it basically for this lecture. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next one. In the last lecture, we saw how rendering works. Now, before working on any state, you should know about rendering. Now, we are going to start the section on hooks, specifically the useState hook. So what is useState hook? useState hook allows functional components to have a state. It returns the state with its full value and a function to update it. When the update function is called, React re-renders the component with the updated state. So let's take an example. Here, I'll add this code. First, I need to import the state that I want to use. So here, I'll import useState. Now, it's little light because I've not used useState. So here, I'll declare a constant called user and set it as Levis. When we update the user, we will use the setUser function. Now I'll call it and remove hello world. So my first state name is Lavis. Here we'll use the user interface and save the user. Now as soon as I refresh the page, my first state name is Lavis. So we'll go to the code and update the Lavis name through the useState, which we have named it as user. Next we'll update our state. How we can do that? I'll uncomment this function and here I'll use update and delete the parameters. So here I'll delete alert2 and what I'll do next is I'll add setUser. I'll update the name to carless instead of Lavis. When the event is triggered, so here is the event, I'll remove it from the event. I've used the function name update. I'm using data here. I saved it and refreshed the page. So here my PyMan is showing, but if I try to update it and in the function I'm using data is equal to and I'm changing the name to John, I save it. But when I refresh the page, my data is not updating and I encountered an error. Actually, okay, so I just save it. I'll save it and I can see the error. Okay, so what happened? I've used cons. I'll use cons instead of that. So I've saved and refreshed now. And okay, now I can't update my data as I want. So data update, because what I wanted to explain to you is like the difference between using useState and a normal variable. So you can't update a normal variable again and again. You can update it through an event by doing proper work. However, when we are using useState, we are updating the whole component. So we can't do that through a variable. Okay, so here I'll solve some problems for you. You must be thinking that why I've used like React.js, because like Next.js is kind of React library or framework. So whatever we are using is also being used in React.js. Okay, Next.js is basically, as you already know, just an updated version of it. So you don't have to worry about like why we are using it like in React.js. Now, let's talk about the second point, which is related like to state. Why do we use state? So we use state because it allows us to dynamically update data within a component. However, there are some restrictions. We cannot update state directly from one component to another. For example, in bridge.js, I can't create state and update login.js data directly. But we can update our data through the props we used last time between two components, i.e. from one component to another. Okay, so the basic rule is that we can only use state within our component state. Alright, so that's it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. After useState, the next important hook is useEffect, which is widely used in any React project. Okay, so what is the actual use of useEffect? UseEffect is used whenever a page or a function is rendered. For example, if I want to display an alert every time the page is rendered, I can use useEffect call to achieve that. As soon as I refresh my page, you can see that my useEffect is automatically called. However, useEffect will only be triggered when there are changes or updates in the specific state or condition. So I'll use user again and save it. I'll remove user from the list and create multiple data submitters here. I'll create a separate function for this and change its name. So I'll remove this. I'm going to refresh the page, and now as soon as I click on this, my useEffect is called. So I'm saving data on user. Actually, I had to turn off the user here. And so, like my data was not updated. As soon as I open it, it's now properly working since my useEffect of Carles1 is on update. There is no effect on update 1. So what I will do is go to the useState, call it, and put condition here that at which state it will be updated and at which state. So before using condition in hook, you have to call that condition. Sometimes the user calls his condition. So I'll call user here. So here you have to select the condition, state, and function. The second mistake is that the user never applies the condition here, since you have to apply outside of the function. Okay, now save it. I'm refreshing the page, and actually I have to do it again and again. So I'm going to get the console here. I saved it. I'm going to copy this console and get it here. I had to do it again and again. I have to apply the condition of user. That is, when the first state is updated, then I should see the useEffect hook. So I refresh. I got you in the wrong place to give you an example. So the condition should be applied outside the function. I refresh the page and click on the buttons. My useEffect hook is used. I've used all the useful effects. As I'm clicking on the second button, I can't see any useful effect. Why? Because I've set the condition in my function that it changes according to what's in user. So if you used multiple states or multiple hooks and you want to apply a condition on any state or any state you want to update or any requirement, you have to apply condition on useEffect. So useEffect will be used when our state is updated. You have to remember that we are working at the state level, specifically within our component. So we manipulate data and use the useEffect. But if you are passing data from one component to another through props, then you have to include the props in the useEffect. Okay, this way you can add a condition based on the props and determine which effect should be used on which prop. Then you have to add props by doing props.user. Okay, so I haven't used any props. That's why it's not working. Okay, so this was our basic lecture in which we saw the use of states. So we have seen like two types of states, useEffect and the second useState. Okay, so thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next lecture. In this lecture, we are going to see our third hook, which is useMemo. useMemo and useEffect are similar, but their workings are different. useMemo enhances our working and also increases the performance of our application. So useEffect and useMemo are used when you want to render a component in a comp, but you have to apply conditions to render a part. useMemo renders only a specific component part, not all the components. The main difference between useEffect and useMemo is that useEffect renders the whole component, while useMemo renders a specific part where we call it. And useMemo increases the performance of our application. Now, we'll see how to use useMemo in practice. So I'll make a counter type function. First of all, I'll create an h1 element and use the count state. I'll create a count related state. I don't have to do anything else here. Just set up the counter state. Next, I'll create a button with the text update count and add a non-click event to it. When the button is clicked, it will update the count value. I'll add the count value. The value of count will be added in every update. You should copy it and I'll add it here. So here I'll set the data and save it. Now I can see the error message. Okay, so I've saved the error message using the bracket. I've realized that I've not used the pound variable yet, so I'll create a variable called pound and assign it a value in the array. Pound should be capitalized. I'll use pound here and set it as per pound. The value of the variable bytecode used in this set will be 20. After copying this, I'll also set the data and add it here. After saving it, I refreshed it, as you can see. So here is the data. Instead of using data, I have to use count. So here is the count and I'll also multiply it. So we are updating the data again and again using the useState hook. Now let's see what we can use in this case. So we'll use the useMemo hook to optimize it. First of all, I'll create a function and call it through the count map. The error is coming back because I didn't call the function properly. To fix it, I'll return the count multiplied by 5 from the function. I'll save the function in the call box and close it. When I click on the function, my data is getting updated. But when I update the function, the data is not getting updated. So I'll remove all of them. What I'll do is I'll use the variable count and call multi-count memo. I'll use memo here and I'll call my function here, which I've taken count memo. Okay, so I've also called it below. Here I'll call the function and return the count, which we got earlier, multiplied by 5, and I will take one more variable here. Now I'll refresh my page. So here it's showing that count memo is not defined. So I'll remove the writing. Here we are getting an issue that count memo is not defined. Actually it's wrong. So here we have to use the callback function and here count memo is being used. I'll remove and here I'll set my variable using useMemo. After that, we have to put the condition on which we have to use useMemo. So I'll add count here and on the update of count, we have to call the useMemo function. So here I'll put a console so that we can see that our proper function is not being called. I'll save it and refresh it. Okay, here I open the console and you can see that my count is updating and my function is working properly and is being called too. But as I'm updating my data, my function is not being called. So my function was being called before. Why is it not getting called now? Because I've used the useMemo function and applied it properly on the count. Okay, if I don't apply it on the count and save it, then like the use effect, it will get called on my function properly. Alright, so my function will get called. Because of this, the performance of our application can be reduced.
Hi and welcome to this new lecture on routing. So what is routing? In this section, we'll see how we can manage and navigate between different pages. So let's see what routing is. Routing is navigating from one page to another page on any website. For example, I have this website, this web application. Now I can change the website's format. I'll change the color of the text. So I have these two buttons. For example, we are assuming it like this. Now I want to navigate to the blog page as soon as I click on it, meaning I want to navigate to the About Us page as soon as I click on it. So this is a simple process. Now let's see a practical version of this. So I go to the website of Angular. Here we have many pages, documents, community, blogs, and so on. If I click on documents, the URL changes to reflect that I'm on the documents page. Similarly, when I click on community, the URL and the page content changes accordingly. So they both change accordingly. Okay, so this process is happening through routing. Now we'll see the simple routing first. I've created the login.js component and its data is being displayed on the main page. However, I want the data of my component to be displayed on a different page, so we can organize our website into distinct sections. For this, I'll create a blog.js component, and when I open the blog page, the content from the blog.js component is displayed there. If I click on Save Blog Page, you can see where the blog page is located. I've opened my local CSS file so that I can create a new page. Okay, so this was a simple routing that we can do through URL. We can create more pages. In fact, I'll create another page here called login form selector with a new function called getArrow. However, I've encountered an error here because due to the capitalization in the login component's name, that's why I got the error. So I deleted it. And here you can see that the login form page has also been created. From here we want to go to the blog page. So this is how we can do simple routing. In the next lecture we'll see how we can create routing through button clicks and add simple routing to our React application. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Now we'll navigate through the links using routing. I'll go to my main page, page.js, which is kind of home component. So here I have a bit of data. I'll remove the main CSS from here because I've already used CSS. So I'll remove it from here and see how the data is displayed here. So now this is our main page data. So here is the blog page. I'll delete it and I'll navigate to the page where I have two pages for now. I'll add a link tag. Now, what is the link? So we can navigate through the link to other pages. We can click on a button or any event and navigate to the page where we added the route. I'll add a link to my blog. I'll type in my blog. So I have to import this error. The error has been removed. So if we go to the browser, we can see that the go to blog page is showing. I'll click on it. Next time the middle line will break. So here is the go to blog page. As I click on blog page, the blog page is shown without scrolling, without loading any UI. So this is the main function of a single page application. Now I'll copy this and paste it in the login page. Okay, sorry, I mean the login form. I have pasted the login form and I'll write login underscore form here. So login form with an underscore and -1. I've saved the file and now I have to go to my main page. I have to type the code for the login form. I have run the login form. Now the issue is that the button which we are clicking on, the login form, is not customized. So I'll paste this link here. I'll refresh and paste my link here. I'll cut and paste again. I've pasted here. I'll put a break here. I'm going to the login form successfully. So this is the end of our simple login. But if you see in the button, there is an underscore in it. So we can either style it properly or we can use our navigation routes to remove these links. Okay, so to remove these underlines, we have to use a router where we don't have to use the link again and again. And we can use our routing by giving a proper path. So we have to import the router first. We have imported the router. After importing the router, we have to use the onClick event. After writing the command, create an anonymous error function. So I know that the error is coming, but we have to fix it. So I'm using the error variable. So what's the error variable? It's a router that's equal to useRouter. So now we are getting some errors. I'll go to the router and check. Okay, I've not made the router properly. If I get an error, I'll check it. So if I click on the button, I can see the error message in the console. I've used the router and the navigation. Okay, I'm going back to the page and I'll remove the link that I've added. I'll click on the link and add a button here. Go to Notes page. Now, you can see the difference between the two buttons. This button is not yet installed, but the other one is. Now I'll click on the blog link. I can see the difference. So here again, I'm going to save it. To add functionality to the button and navigate to other pages, I'll make a separate video for that. In that video, I'll explain how you can navigate to other pages. So you should try to watch that video and practice it yourself. But for now, like for this lecture, that's pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next lecture. In this lecture, I'll show you how to create a browser using the exercises I'll give you in this video. Okay, so if I move this, you can use fragments like this, and here we need a button that's needed for mounting. So now we have to import our user. Here you can see the navigator, the router is here, but you have to use navigation. All you have to do is use a key, and you have to use a value in that router. Here you can see the error message suggesting to use the router, so it's suggesting the use of router. Make sure not to confuse it with the function use router. So they are not the same, actually, they are not the same. So use the function of use router. I've left the last line here, copy the last line and paste it here. Okay, so you can see the error message, use router here. You can see the error, like the use auto error. Actually, I've told you earlier that the name of our component is always used as error captcha. So here you have to use the captcha word. Okay, here you can see that our error is related to Mobus. However, an error is going to come on the browser because we are working in the client component. So I'm going to select the blogging page and click on login. Main page is the go to page form. And here you have to use the fragment style if you don't want to use the main element. Okay, so here is the error. I'm going to remove it. Now the error is removed. We'll change the home page and the login form will be changed. Okay, here we'll change the routing. And now we have to create a new component. So now we are able to navigate properly. We've created our navigation properly, but we can make like proper styling, of course, like for our navigation, which will give us like a design on all the pages where the home loggers will be present. So we'll do that in our styling part. I'll show you how to display the navigation at the same time. Okay, but for now that's pretty much it. So let's move on. So after covering basic routing, we'll now move to dynamic routing. How can we do dynamic routing? So what's the actual meaning of dynamic routing? Dynamic routing involves creating routes for different pages or components within a specific section. For example, if I have a blog page, I may have multiple subpages or blogs within it, such as news, sports, or other categories. How can I add a blog related to that? So we do that by following these steps. The URL will be like this. First, I'll go to the blog page, then I'll proceed to the news page and view the posts. For this, I'll go to the library and look for the community page. I think I've no other option. Now I've opened the first tutorial and the first app. After that, I've opened the routes in the first app, specifically in the lesson 3. So we can use it in Angular as well. Like if I go to Next.js, the Next.js website is here and we can see all the routes available. So in this way, we can properly manage routing. Now let's move on to the practical part of dynamic routing for multiple pages. First of all, we have to go to the app and create a folder. We have already created a folder for the blog. Now I'll create another folder inside the blog called new blog. Inside the new blog folder, I'll add a file named page.ps. Additionally, I'll create a login form where I include a sign-up page, and in the sign-up page, I'll have another file named page.ps. Like this, I have different files in my local directory. I'll create a new component named noseFlow and use it to write my text, to get sign-up data and export it as a React functional component. After saving it, I'll select the sign-up page and sign in. If I go to the blog page, there is nothing here. I have the new blog, I've been writing a lot of things inside it. Now I'll open the login form. After that, I'll open the dynamic routing page. I'll go to the sign up page. I should put it here. And now I've put the sign up file. Okay. I'll show you how to use proper routing. So how to use the router and how to do the navigation through the buttons. So I'll add one more button here. I'll copy this blog. I'll click on save, and in that there is a login form. After the login form, the routing that I have is blog. So here I have blog slash, and after the slash, my next route is new blog. I'll click on new blog, and I've already created a new blog. So I'll copy this button. I'll go to the login form. I have a sign up page in the login form. I'll go to reload and select the place where I'll add the breaks. And then I'll add the button and go to the sign up page. I'll also add the routing here. Okay, actually here the spelling of sign up is wrong. So it should be sign up. And here the spelling of drop is also wrong. So I adjusted. If I now go to the login form, I have sign up here. Here I have to click on sign up. I have already signed up and registered. If you want to use all these routes in our form component, I'll copy this process and then go to my page.js. After the login form, I've already signed up. I'll paste it here and add a new blog. And if I want to update here, I'll add blog. And where I want to add next blog, I'll add new blog. Okay, I've saved it. Now I'll go to my main browser. In the main browser, I've selected login page, sign up page, and then click on direct sign up page. If I click on new blog, then I'll see directly new blog. Here also we have a separate home page. Whatever we want to do, we can create a back page, damaging only one option. But now we need dynamic routing, so we can create multiple routes and do dynamic routing successfully. But here we have another option, another function that instead of creating multiple routes, allows us to create a function by using a dynamic type through which we can do proper routing. Okay, we can use navigator. If we use a natural router, we can use this function. I'll create a function and add a parameter to it. I'll create a parameter in the name of blog. I'll add a router to it, and I want to perform the routing here. Okay, so we only have like one way to do it. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this lecture. Let's carry on in the next one. Hi and welcome to this new lecture on common layout versus condition layout. So our main routing work is done. We've learned how to create different dynamic URLs using different routing. If a user is connected to a specific page, we can do all these things. However, there is still one thing missing. If I go to the website of Next.js, I can see a nav bar. If I go to the components of documents or blog, there is no problem or issue when I want to go back to the previous page. So what are the things used in the layout.js? In layout.js, the elements used are the header on the first position, the footer on the second, and the side page on the third. The scroll bar and the side page are not compulsory. Some elements used are present on the website, while others are not. The main elements used here are the header and the footer, and we use layout.js to display them consistently across multiple pages. Layout.js comes in two types. The common layout, which is what I'm currently using, it will be visible on all pages. However, I'll also want it to be invisible on some pages. Okay, therefore we use conditional layout. For example, my blog page's layout is visible on my blog page, but I want it to be invisible on my hello world and use blog page. To achieve this, we'll add conditions in the code. Okay, so this was our theoretical part, and in the next lecture we'll dive into the practical aspect and see how we can use layout.js manually. So let's move on. So in this lecture, we'll practice layout and see how we can display specific content on all pages, including the blog page. At the moment, I only have one blog page, but I'll create additional sub-routes. First, I'll create a sports blog, and then I'll add another blog. Next, I'll add an article selector for articles, and I'll create files for this purpose. So I'll create a file called page.js, which is already present in the blog section. However, it's not related to this course's blog page.js. So here in the React arrow function, I'll create a code function and I'll cut this part too. I'll capture it and check. If I go to the articles page, the article page is loading. Okay, actually I think I have to click on articles to remove it. So I now have 3 different pages. You can see I don't want this variable and I don't want this export metadata because this is used on the browser, and when we use the browser we add all the title which is cut. You can see that I don't need this variable and I don't want this export metadata because this is used on the browser, and when we use the browser we add all the titles which are needed. So I don't want this either. I'll just save it. I'll also use this class name for CSS. I'll use the h1 tag for this. I'll check if it's working properly. If I go to the blog page, I can see the hello world, but if I go to the main page, I can't see the hello world. So first of all, I'll add my article. Before adding the article, we need a link tag. I've already told you why link tag is used, because whenever we want to use routing through navigation, the link tag will be used. But as seen in Next.js, we use the simple router. So I'm using the link to practice both things, and I'll paste it here. So one article is done and the other one is news blog, where one of my pages is related to sports blog. Here I'll also add the routes. Okay, so here will be the news blog and here will be the sports blog now. Okay, now I'll go to my browser to add a style to the blog page, create a new blog page and make a class with the name class. I'll apply the display style to it, and if I go to the layout page of the blog, I'll see the class in the URL. So here the class name is used, not the class. I'll take the layout and import the layout menu. Okay, actually I've not imported it. So import ./.style.css. In this I'll go to the left and type in the name of the device. Next, the list of devices will be displayed. And then in the layout menu, I'll type in the link tag of the device. Text decoration is done. And as you can see here, it's looking good. Now we can do text center, text align center. We can't go to center because here we've used the flex system. Okay, here you can see that if we go to other things, if we go like to this article page, this is in the center. All these things come in CSS. We'll see that in the next section, and yeah, we'll learn like how we can do proper stacking and how we can make modules in this. Okay, so we can check all those things, but for now that's pretty much it. Like, thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next lecture. Okay, so in the beginning we discussed 2 types of layout forms, the basic layout and the conditional layout. We've already seen the basic layout, where we can create a layout and use it for multiple routes, allowing us to have a consistent design across specific pages. But what is the meaning of the conditional layout? For instance, if I go to my main page and add a route here, when I go to my blog page, both routes will mix up, and the intended layout might not work as expected. To avoid this issue, we need to implement a conditional layout. Okay, so to achieve this, we first need to import the path name function. Here we call the function usePath using JSX or center position. We then ask to usePath call this function not equal to the condition. Now paste the code in the layout where you want to apply the condition. Okay, so I'm going to this route where my layout is not working. And by doing this, the route should not have any space, and any existing spaces should be removed. Okay, so as soon as I go, you can see that my sports page layout has been removed from here. The article is working properly, and so is the news blog. However, as soon as I click on the sports blog, my layout is finished from here. So this is how we can use a conditional layout. Okay, so that's it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. Hi everyone, and welcome to this new lecture on middleware. So, in this lecture we'll learn about middleware and we'll see how to use middleware in Next.js. Okay, so as I told you, I've customized my website a little bit. It means that if I go to the home page, I've created some more routes. So when I provide the source code, all the practices performed by us like login form and sign and etc. will be made available to you easily in the source codes. Okay, I've added a new route of hooks. All data related to hooks is stored in this route. Now we have to check how to use middleware in Next.js. So what is middleware in Next.js? In Next.js, basically middleware encompasses a function or a series of functions employed to customize server behavior and manage incoming requests before they reach the router handle. So middleware functions are positioned between incoming requests and route handlers, enabling you to execute a range of tasks including authentication, logging, request parsing, error handling, and more. Okay, so Next.js provides a flexible middleware system that allows you to define a custom middleware function with your application. Utilizing middleware in Next.js enables you to structure your application logic simply, promote the reuse of common functionality across routes, and add additional processing to incoming requests and outgoing responses. Okay, now let's take a look at how this works in practice and how we can apply restrictions to specific actions. Okay, I'll explain this with the help of an example involving a login and sign up form. Imagine you have a login and sign up form on your website. The typical process is that if someone wants to log in, they first need to sign up if they don't already have an account. To enforce this rule, you can set up restrictions. For instance, if a user clicks on the login button, tries to access the login form's URL directly, or enters the login form's URL in their browser, they should be automatically redirected to the sign-up page if they don't have an account yet. So how can we achieve this? The answer is by using middleware. To get started, navigate to your source folder. So it's essential not to create the middleware in the app folder. Create a new file named middleware.js in the source folder. In this middleware.js file, we will define a small function which will export as middleware. Within this function, add a console log middleware working statement and then save the file. Actually, you won't observe the middleware working directly on the browser console. If I navigate to the browser and click on sign up, you won't see any output in the console despite the interactions with the hooks. In fact, the middleware's activity is reflected on the server or terminal. If I open the terminal, you'll notice that the function calls are printed here. However, if I return to the browser, click on the login form, and then check the terminal again, it might not display the expected results to confirm whether the functions are functioning correctly. Okay, let's investigate why the expected behavior is not being achieved. Actually, the main issue is in the file name. So the spelling of the name is not correct. I've not written the correct name of the file, which I've selected. Okay, so now I've added the correct middleware file name. I'll save it again. Now if I go to home page and click on hooks, I still can't see any working here. Alright, so here we can see the working of middleware. Middleware is working properly as we are going to a page or jumping to a page. So my middleware is working properly. My server is working properly. So if you go to a page, that page will be rendered. It will be rendered on server. Then here we can see middleware, but it will be rendered only once. But if you refresh the whole website, so you can see all the pages are redirected and rendered again. That's why multiple working is displayed in terminal. Okay, so you can use middleware like this basically. Now, let's delve into an advanced version of middleware where we'll apply restrictions and demonstrate how to redirect pages. To begin, we need to create a request object. I'll start by removing the console statements, and first we'll craft a request object. Within the request, we'll construct an if statement that checks the path name. If the path name equals /signup, we'll take action, i.e. if request.pathname equals quotation marks, then /signup. Okay, so but before, before we proceed with this initial condition, we need to import an additional feature, which is next response. Within the next response, we'll define a redirection to a new URL. The destination URL will be signup and will retain the request URL as a parameter. With this setup, our response logic is nearly complete. Now we need to introduce a not equal condition. If the path name is not equal to signup, our page will be redirected to the signup page. However, you may encounter multiple redirections to the signup page when clicking on the login form. This issue arises because the URL configuration isn't accurate. The signup route is nested within the login form, requiring us to include the login form's route. Okay, so after saving and refreshing, as you can see, an error persists. To resolve this, we need to make this condition more specific. So we want it to apply only when clicking on the login form, redirecting to the signup page, while allowing other pages to function as expected. Okay, so to achieve this specificity, we'll export a constant, configure it for the signup route, and use a colon to indicate the start of this configuration. After saving and refreshing, you might encounter an error. Okay, so that's it for this lecture. Let's move on to the next one and carry on with our course. Hi everyone, and welcome to this new lecture on APIs. Today we'll delve into the process of fetching data from an API in our client component. To begin, let's set the stage. I've already created an API folder and added it to the route as blogs using a link. Now let's head back to the home page. If there is an API, we'll navigate to it. So we're going to fetch data from a dummy API. You can find such dummy APIs online by searching for dummy JSON in your browser. These are essentially free APIs that provide a variety of data like products, cards, posts, users, and more. We have a substantial amount of user data available, which you can use for practice purposes, hence the name dummy API. Firstly, we need to import two essential hooks, useEffect and useState. These will play a significant role in manipulating the data. Now let's move on to fetching the data. We'll use useEffect and create an arrow function within it to fetch the data asynchronously. This involves making an API call and storing the response in a variable. It's a process akin to JavaScript, so if you're familiar with JavaScript, you'll notice some similarities. We'll import the data from the dummy API we want to use. For example, if we want to access user data, we'll copy the user data URL and place it within the brackets. Then we'll create a data variable and use await to fetch the data, which is retrieved as a JSON file. However, it's important to handle errors. To do this, we'll include an error handling mechanism. If an error occurs during data retrieval, we'll log the error to the console to help us identify and address any issues. Now, as we have our response and error handling in place, we need to actually use the data. Currently, we're not seeing any results because we haven't called the data yet. Let's navigate to the data and put it to use. So we'll utilize useState to manage this data. In this regard, we'll declare a users variable using useState. We'll leave it empty as we won't provide any default values. The values will come from the data. Okay, so to display this data, we'll use console.data, which is incorrect. So we should use console.log parenthesis data instead. All right, we'll set users using set users and pass data.users to it. This is where we retrieve the user data. Now let's display this data on our web page. We'll use a map function to iterate through the users and display their first names using h3 tags. We'll also provide a key for each h3 tag to ensure unique identification. Once we've covered the minor typo, we'll see all the first names printed below the API text. Each h3 tag corresponds to a user's first name. To further customize the display, you can add styling to format the data as needed. Styling allows you to present the data in a more structured and visually appealing manner, such as in a table. Okay, so this lecture has covered the basics of using an API, including fetching data and handling it. You can explore various APIs online, as well as inspect APIs used on other websites through the Network tab in your browser's developer tools. This helps you understand the structure of data provided by different APIs. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this lecture, and now on to the next one. In the previous lecture, we learned how to make API calls in a client component. Specifically, we explored our API folder and saw how to interact with APIs as a client component. In that context, we utilized the client approach. Now there is a new twist. I've set up a separate folder where we'll create a server API. So what exactly is a server API? Essentially, it means we'll take the dummy API we've been using and run it as a server in our application. This marks a transition from working with client components to server components. In this new environment, we'll be using asynchronous operations extensively. We'll begin by creating a function named userList. Within this function, we'll perform the necessary data retrieval. So what's on our fetch list? It's our API, the URL that was copied from a website and integrated into the page.js file. So we'll fetch this data and await its response, indicating that we expect some JSON data. Consequently, we'll return data.users as our result. At this stage, you might not notice any significant changes in our component. However, we must also create an async function for the default export since we want to fetch data. Now let's create a variable called user and set it equal to the result of userList. Please note that I made a correction here. We should use userList in this context. We'll verify that everything is functioning correctly by logging user to the console. If you check the console, you'll find that no data appears there. That's because the data fetched by the server is only accessible within the server environment. So how do we access it? We do this via our terminal. When we open the terminal, we can see that all the data, including IP addresses, is displayed there. The data from our API is successfully retrieved in the server environment. To confirm its proper operation, we'll manually print a statement to this console. Like to the console, we'll try to print a statement. Okay, after saving the file, you'll notice that the statement prints successfully each time you save it. This confirms that our server is functioning as expected. Now, to bring our data into the server component, we can simply copy the code we used for the client component and paste it here. In this specific case, I'm only interested in the name data to check whether it's working correctly. With no apparent errors, we can proceed to the terminal. Okay, so everything seems fine. When we go to our browser, we can see that the server API is working seamlessly. If we inspect the network and examine the preview of the server API, it's evident that everything is functioning as expected on the server. Okay, so this is how we effectively use our API in a server component. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon in the next lecture. Alright, so far in our course we've explored two fundamental aspects, client-side and server-side components, along with client-side and server-side APIs. We've delved into all three of these facets, having executed APIs in both client and server components. Now, let's take a moment to clarify the key distinctions between client and server components. Okay, so both client and server components function effectively, but why do we differentiate between them? So let's break it down. Client components come into play when we're designing elements like search bars, incorporating hooks, or creating interactive buttons on a website. In the visual representation on your screen, you'll notice that purple boxes represent server components, while blue boxes represent client components. In the context of server components, we don't typically implement events in the navigation bar, nor do we require buttons. It's all about providing a straightforward user interface. Components such as the sidebar, main menu, footer, and header fall into the server component category because they don't necessitate event handling. This is where Next.js shines, as it excels in SEO optimization by eliminating the need to repeatedly render these core components. On the other hand, client components, encompassing elements like buttons and search bars, require a different approach. They involve managing various aspects using hooks such as useMemo, useEffect, and useState. Events like onClick are commonplace, and different types of alerts may be employed. In server components, we utilize techniques like get server-side props to fetch data. These server-side components are instrumental for implementing server-based functions. Alright, so in summary, server components are the go-to choice when we don't require events to refresh an entire component. This distinction is vital in deciding which approach to take based on the specific requirements of your web application. Alright, so that's pretty much it for this lecture. Thank you for watching and see you soon in the next one. Now, let's explore the process of optimizing images using Next.js. Image optimization involves customizing the image size to meet our specific requirements. You may have encountered websites where the overall page loads swiftly, but the images within the site take a bit longer to appear, as they continue loading until the data transfers from the server to your browser. So this can be a significant drawback for websites. To address this concern, Next.js provides image optimization capabilities, allowing us to tailor images as needed. So let's dive into it with an example. In your VS Code, you'll find some images in the public folder. Feel free to use your own images if you prefer, but for this demonstration, we'll use the default images provided. Navigate to the main page, closing other folders for clarity. Okay, before using an image, we must import it. So we'll import the image using a library provided by Next.js, accessed with next/images. Additionally, we'll import img, which can be named as desired. Now let's locate the image within the public folder. So to do so, navigate out of the app folder, then out of the source folder, which will bring you to the public folder. Here you'll find vercel.svg, the image we'll use. Let's insert a line break, and now we can use our image. To insert an image, start with a capital letter followed by image / and close the tag. However, it's crucial to specify the alt attribute to prevent a warning message from displaying if the image fails to load for any reason. Okay, so providing the alt text ensures that a meaningful description, img in this case, appears when the image is unavailable. Alright, now, what about the image source? So we simply use src followed by the name we gave during the import. Save the file, then check it in the browser. Okay, in this instance, the image may not load immediately. If that happens, try restarting your server, as it can sometimes encounter issues. Alright, upon successful loading, you'll see the image. Inspect the elements and view the image details. Notice that asynchronous loading is employed, which is facilitated by Next.js. The image is styled appropriately with default width and height attributes displayed. If we were to use a regular HTML image tag, img between brackets, the loading behavior would differ. We would only see the image source displayed directly. However, by utilizing Next.js, we benefit from asynchronous loading, improved styling, and optimization. Okay, next, let's explore using an open source image, meaning that we want to incorporate an image directly from an online source without downloading it. So for this, we'll visit Unsplash. There, we'll select an image, open it in a new tab, and copy its link. Back in our code, we'll replace the existing image source with this online link. However, an error may arise stating that a host name, images.unsplash.com, needs to be added to the configuration. To resolve this, navigate to the configuration settings and add images under domains, matching the path specified in the image URL and the browser's hostname. Upon saving and reloading the page, the image should now load without errors. This approach allows for efficient image optimization, as the image size is automatically adjusted, resulting in faster loading times. Okay, to illustrate this, we can compare the sizes of two images. The first one, like the first image, which is like in SVG, is 240 bytes, while the second image, sourced online, is a mere 202 bytes. This optimization proves particularly valuable when dealing with larger and heavier images, as it ensures that images load promptly on your website without compromising user experience. Okay, so that's it for this lecture. Thank you very much for watching, and see you soon in the next one.